Okay. Oh, I forgot to change the wallpaper again. Oh my god. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is a very important one, and it follows a concept that I've been constantly through. It's been a thing, I think, at least close to 6 years. I've been trying to I've been constantly reapproaching this concept of the depth of our mind, the way our intelligence functions, how the mind and the body are a relationship together, how the moment has a sort of objective quality and has a subjective quality. I began wondering about the story of the human being, and so, in some sense, the first human being I had access to was myself. So I began studying the way I found experience to happen for me. I wondered if it happens voluntarily, if it happens involuntarily, what aspects of the voluntary part of my experience is truly in my free will, what aspects are not. And so pretty much I concluded that the human being exists in two dimensions at once. What I specifically, I guess I can get to now, is that once I managed to divide life into, in some sense, the known and the unknown, I began kind of finding a new relationship with the nature of how my moment was present. I noticed that I am keeping an idea of myself around all the time in order to communicate. This idea of me is so convinced by my experiences of my subtler planes of abstraction. So here is where the concept becomes crucial. You see, I thought about it and I wondered, how come we know so little about the mind? How come we're always studying the effects of the mind and what is, in some sense, the source of the mind? And for the first time, I had to entertain a notion that it was unknowable. I began to entertain that there is a secret within us all that we will never be able to find, for it is not a tangible thing, it is rather a moment that is being. So when I speak, and especially through the subjective evolution, which is a concept I speak about, that at first it was the unconscious move of nature. Then came the great separation. Long story short, this separation led to a recognition of world and self. And then, as the world had unknown elements, since the sense of self came from the world, the sense of self brought with it unknown elements as well. That means there's ways to your intelligence that are in some sense preserved by the unknown. Now, language's position in culture and reality is very important. Language is in some sense being your thoughts, language and imagery, and any symbol in between. I have a relationship that I've developed with my any sort of abstract or ideological notion that comes to me, and I consider it in my subtler planes of imagination. The first thing I notice about imagination that it's like if I was to imagine a cloud right now, a small cloud right in front of me, just hovering in the air like a meter away from me. The design of it exists in my experience, yes, existentially, it was just a passing thought. So you see, it's as if we are reacting to our imagination as if it is real because we have to consider it as data in our system. Okay, so it's like you cannot avoid your imagination, you know? Similar to like somebody can try so hard not to laugh, but suddenly things become more funnier actually when the situation becomes tense, you know? And so what I'm trying to say that if I tell you don't think of an apple right now, the word apple will hit your ears, and in some sense, the image of an apple will arise. You see, it is language is a kind of relationship in our experience. We're not creatures of thought. We're not creatures of language. Yet we're intertwined with this technology. And in some sense, what is more unfortunate than the man in the car thinking he's the car? You know, that means you're using a system. Imagine you use a wrench to like fix something, but then you forget to put the wrench down and you accept the wrench as a part of your arm. So what I'm trying to tell you, it's like that kind of notion. We have accepted language to be us, yes, yet language is as temporal as the world we stand in. So in some sense, our exploration in eternity, there isn't much evidence that can be provided. You know, if the world is being assumed to be temporary in some sense, and our world, personally, I'm speaking. The reason I'm saying our, it's in some sense every person is actually staring at two worlds. They don't realize that there's a world that they see, and there's a world that sees them, which is all the eyes of all the intelligent living beings that are present. You see, it's imagine like the internet, this kind of connectivity we see in social media. Social media has opened up many various ways of communication, you know. And so now I want you to imagine this communication is was in nature, as if nature already had a social media platform. You know, it was in the wind, it was in some sense every elemental change of this world we're in. So what I find it unique is that I was kind of really looking at it. I was reverse engineering out of everything I had been taught into a moment where I, in some sense, saw something that I had not seen before. And there's different ways of sight. There's some things you see physically that it's like a beautiful sunset, how beautiful. And then there's some things you see which is a sort of inner subjective depth to the objective movement. This inner subjective depth eventually comes back to you. So eventually the person has to recognize. So I'll give you an example. Right now, before I spoke, it was complete silence. Then words spring out of nowhere. These words are symbols simply. Yet, these symbols originate out of in a sort of internal experience of some sort of image. These words that I'm saying to you, they're not all words. That means I've kind of noticed that when the moment you realize you're not a thought, you get access to using thoughts. You get access to your intelligence, because the moment you think you're a thought, the design of that thought is your prison. So if you think everything is like good, suddenly everything that, so many things that could perhaps not be good are suddenly seen as good. This is why many people argue that it is a sort of flaw to consider human nature just good, you know? And in some sense, it's also a flaw to think human nature to be evil. Because if it was evil, only evil, there never would have been a concept of a good. You know, and if it was only good, there never would have been the concept of an evil. So pretty much we're in a changing part of this universe. Religions promise us a sort of heaven afterwards if we behave properly, and a sort of, or a hell. You know, it's like kind of you get a good deal, bad deal kind of situation. That means many religious businessmen who, like, how can I say the guy's a businessman but he's religious, you know? Guess how he thinks about philosophy and religion? He thinks about which one has the most profit. So most people, I'm telling you, it's not just businessmen, it's many people who the way they choose to be intelligent is by seeing what is the most profitable. It is very hard to see yourself in a world that's constantly telling you what you are. You know, this was kind of my effort in these Mr. Within talks to see, like, why do people need teachings? You know, it's as if like Buddha could see himself enlightened. Could he not see the world? Could he not see the subjective problems non-existent? And so, regardless of how awakened Buddha was, a lot of the world is still sleeping. I consider children not born yet still sleeping, soon to wake up to the world. I consider that intelligence works in a sort of systematic way where, as it expands, it destroys itself in the process. That means our death will be the space for the future generations. We can't be on this planet too long. Just by design, by the nature of our design, we are in a situation where it's as if you are sitting on the bus. When you get to your destination, others people use the bus. So the world seems to be a sort of transitory passage of experience. And eventually you will get to a point where I said very poetically, I say it's like that moment of meaning where you finally understand what it means for there to be no meaning. It's not per se a chaotic, it's only chaotic if you're egotistical. If you notice, emotions arise when you are a sense of self. Emotions linger around an owner. If you in some sense suddenly did not own anything, you would suddenly feel you're just eyes in the world. So fundamentally, there's an experience many human beings will find themselves. It's kind of innately built in our system that there will be moments in this life. Don't think every moment, every second should be filled with meaning and purpose. That is unnatural. Our eyes are open in a world where there's emptiness as much as fullness. There is empty space holding all the galaxies and suns and many conceivable celestial orbs. So when I say engaging subtler realities of abstraction, it means a conscious effort towards your imagination. Now, why is this important? Why am I like I was born in 1991. There were so many people who were artists, so much art history before I was born. Why should I? Why should I speak about art? And I'll tell you, I have no social opinion unless I see, in some sense, a vacuum. There's a saying that says, when the student is ready, the master appears. That means when in society there is so much tension and injustice, eventually someone will speak out. And I am not claiming any banner. I am just telling you I am walking in a path where many lions have walked before me, you know? I am a cub compared to the types of human beings and the ways human beings have lived, but I recognize the value of my moment. I find that that's something I, in some sense, had a sort of, I don't want to say talent for, but it's like the reason I early on considered honesty to be, in some sense, the kind of natural state. Let me tell you why. Because prior to language, there was just momentary being. So our intelligence finds itself actually so defined by a moving world that to be still in this moving place will kind of, that's why most people are trying meditation. You know what meditation is? It's hilarious. If you were like a dove or an extraterrestrial looking out like from an aerial view at like a human being meditating, you'd kind of see that human being going throughout their day, busy, angry, going through many different emotions, many different ways their intelligence and energy is being expressed and responding to the stimulus of the environment. But eventually, that moment where the person stops, sits still and silent in a changing world to really look at what's changing, that becomes a revelatory moment. You see, it's like when your eyes are open, you will see it. The world doesn't hide itself, man does. Man hides himself not only in the walls that he creates, but also in the thoughts that he wears. We wear thoughts. Did you know that? Me calling myself Mr. Within right now, I'm wearing this thought, guys. But we are not a creature of thought, which begs the question, then what are we? We will fundamentally know that we are creatures of experience. So the most important institution is the institution of honest, free, natural experience. This must be protected, more important than your human rights, the right for life to be here. Okay? And we have that right because our eyes are open. You see, this is why I say it's as if one advice I will tell the children of the future generations. Only when you find the self that never existed will you feel the world is yours. That means you will be responsible for it. You see, it's as if we have to start from an egotistic place. There's so many people shaped in certain identities that they will never be able to get out of in this lifetime. I have spoken to someone and I have asked them a question, and the moment the question entered their ear, it's as if they did not want the show they were in to end. So, what I mean by that is that nobody knows you better than you. So if there is any sort of leap in intelligence and acknowledgement of the depths of imagination, it will have to come from you. Now, the thing is, the person changes throughout the day. That means you sleep at night and you wake up and you're like, it's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new self. You run into, it's a new world. But eventually what happens? Data will not be shy and will move forward. Communication will hit you. Many various ways the world looks and behaves will be seen by your eyes. So in some sense, the destiny of your eyes was to open to the world, yet the biology is designed that we need to sleep and to be awake. That means who said truth is just pure awakening all the time? You know? Who said everybody can just be in one state all the time? There is mystical implications of a kind of non-conceptual state of being where presence has no need to be separate. So that's the death of history. It's the death of history as the conscious mind penetrates the unconscious through in some sense restructuring with the free will, the subconscious mind. You see, those people who I see have efficient habits. You see them. There's this great YouTube channel called Impact Theory. I feel that channel is very blessed. And when I saw the channel Impact Theory, I began to see how many human beings had stories to share. And I realized the world is filled with untold stories. And so only through the care of attention and the elegance of communication can the greater worlds come forth. You see, we will eventually reach a point where we will get bored of physical exploration, which, funny enough, we have as a species. Okay? That means when we have people having debates rather than physically fighting on the street, that is a sort of change of a need for a physical journey to continue. Now the subtler journeys are important, and the subtler journeys are actually require the mind. And I have this firm belief that when I saw how well the objective evolution, Darwin's evolution, how long that idea stood the test of time, I began to see a value. And I began to see human beings need evolution as a story to evoke their spirit. And when I say evoke their spirit, I am not concluding that you are an immaterial, kind of hollow, ethereal kind of ghost moving around through different bodies through lifetimes. The mind is very easy to shape. It is like the most sensitive clay. Just any thought can shape your world. So in this talk, I'm going to share something unique. I'm going to tell you. Going to kind of. It's like a slow camera zoom in on actually how my personal experiences kind of realigned the concept of the unconscious and imagination. You see, imagination, I didn't care. When I was young, I have a twin brother and I considered him to be incredibly creative, and I considered myself to be just these eyes that are watching, you know? It was as if the world for me, it didn't animate in my mind. My mind was dormant. My mind was asleep a bit longer than many people around me. Okay, because it was asleep, the moment it woke up, there was an urgency to catch up. And I'm not talking about anything physical at this point. I'm talking about the development of the individualness of the being. So most children roam around in a world where they're like, oh, everything's perfect. And eventually the imperfections of the world slowly reveal. They reveal through emotional sense, through breakups and relationships. They reveal through, let's say, a subjective sense, through suddenly the person realizing something they've believed is suddenly hollow. And suddenly we recognize the era of idea worship we are in, the era of symbol worship we are in. When a person seeks truth, that whole mission of truth is started out of a statement. The language, we don't realize how subtle it is that language is keeping individuality. I often say language is the skin of the ego. That was one of those findings of mine where I was like, yes, I could potentially be one of those human beings who found a way to shape this idea. I find that even Carl Jung noticed that the conscious person, in some sense, entertains a system of archetypes. What that means is how you consider yourself a person in this moment, is how you have, in some sense, seen people. You see a child that has a caring father. The child stands beside his father trying to be like his father. What you honor and respect, subconsciously you try to be like. It's just like a pattern develops in childhood and beyond. And so what happens is that the child who's trying to act like his father is in awe of something he feel he is not yet. Okay, the only reason you train is because there is something to achieve. But when we wonder about the achievements of the mind, it suddenly has to acknowledge its muscles. And the muscles of your mind are every image, shape, abstract conception that has, in some sense, been generated and conceived by your brain. What you have recorded, everything you have seen is accessible, yet it remains in your unconscious. And it doesn't remain in your unconscious as a weird pool of something, like a whirlwind of unconscious imagery of various things your awareness picked up throughout your lifetime till now. You're going to notice that the most important relationship human beings have is with data. That means after you've found water, after you found food, after you found shelter, after you found love, you're going to see there's something left. And what will be left will be the data that endlessly will visit you every day till the last day you die. Okay, data will visit you. This data is life. I use the word data, but it is much more natural than that. The elegance of nature, that there's a silent secret it abides by. That is the Tao. The Tao is the silent secret because only through silence you can hear, you can see how your words are kept. It's very funny. When I looked at existence, the observer became non-existence. When I looked at non-existence, the observer became existent. And I began to see how many games the mind is playing with itself, like a child lost in a playground, endless playground. The child's like, okay, how many games do I play? This is too much. When the child reaches that mindset, eventually a miracle happens. I say boredom is a miracle. Anytime there's boredom, when a teacher speaks and students in a class get bored, that's a miracle. That is the most unique feedback the teacher can get. The mentality of many people, I believe, is that you start as an objective biological body, like right now, this instant, as I'm speaking. You know, this body you see, like right now, look at your legs, like look at your body, okay? When you look at it, you find something interesting. You see that the parts that you can move, that which is in your free will, can be owned subjectively. That which is not in your free will cannot be owned subjectively. It can be assumed, it can be tried to be claimed. There have been many people who have tried to wear the mask of God and their face is broken before the mask has even been seen. We all attempt what we feel we can. Yet we have to come to a sort of contentment with this constant relationship of potential energy becoming kinetic, kinetic energy becoming potential. That means there's this kind of dormant kind of force kind of state, and then there's the shape and kind of expression. You're like this kind of, how can I tell you? like this golden sine wave that is going through the dirt in and out, going, it's as if like your evolution is not a direct line, it's a spiral. You're spiraling into higher states of consciousness. You're not evolving linearly and mechanically to it. That's for the technology. Let technology build robots. Let society build humans. Our humanity is like, it's very funny. I feel it can never get lost. I feel no person can be that evil. Let me tell you. I mean, there is definitely evil intentions, maliciousness, various ways that, in some sense, the shadows of the world to kind of hold the world as well as the light does. But the notion is that because there's cycles all around, because there's a cyclical quality to the astrophysical position of our universal sector, it's like you're going to understand as the body follows laws, your mind follows your free will, which is the law creator. And your mind is an effect of a sort of internal concluding system. That means, trust me, your mind is seeing moments ahead of your current moment. That's how evolved we are. You think we have evolved for 4 billion years and come into this world empty-handed? Not at all. Each DNA holds within it a unique structure. Each design brings with it a unique skill. There's ways that the eyes of the world can open which have not yet, and which they will. And it's not my saying, it's just that's how nature breathes. It breathes through the change of an ever-present continuity. Plato has a sentence where he says, time is the moving image of eternity. Now, Heraclitus, this other Greek philosopher, ancient philosopher, he has this saying where he says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. So what does that mean? Time is the moving image of eternity. We have that in one parallel line, and then we have in another parallel line, in some sense, the kind of every moment being a new moment, a new universe of itself. So it's as if like time is the moving image of eternity because each moment has an eternal image value. Before you experience change, the moment you're in now, is now's eternity. Okay, then the next moment is the next now's eternity. So when Plato said time is the moving image of eternity, he was in some sense saying it is the attention that is moving between various eternal layouts, you know. Trust me, language is something we ascribe to objectivity. The subjectivity, if I ask you, if there were no human beings, do you think our languages, our libraries would have any value to other animals? If human beings all were gone, and but all the civilization we had built, you know, was in some sense left, do you think all the other animals on this planet would be able to engage with it? No. We have a sophisticated kind of burst of evolution, and I kind of find it very unique. I feel the earth is a sort of storehouse of energy, okay, and the reason things gravitate to it not just because of its physical mass. It's kind of like an eye, okay. So imagine the ancient Egyptian. He's like, okay, let me see this. Sun's entering my eyes. Okay, I'm an ancient Egyptian. I don't have any knowledge to doubt whatever I imagine. So, so the ancient Egyptians saw light entered their eyes, and they looked at the sun, and it seemed to be an eye. It seemed to be the pupil of an eye. Do you see? So the ancient Egyptians felt it was the light of they acknowledged the sun as a god, ancient Egyptians, you know. And when they acknowledged the sun as a god, they acknowledged the light of their being as their truth. Do you see? They acknowledge the divine presence. Any culture that divine acknowledges a divine presence in its mythology or history or any sort of somehow it's evoked in the cultural system. If you notice, people can own stuff, but they cannot own emptiness. They cannot own space. Once you kind of notice this, you come into a state of mind where you're like, oh my God, my whole life I was trying to be something, do something. You know, I was trying to, in some sense, go that method of just a sort of egoic kind of search. And suddenly I see, oh my God, just like words on a piece of paper where there's empty spaces in between, you find empty moments in life. You find moments where your mind is either close to the situation or the world is not open to you. It's very common. To be honest, I feel life happens in bursts, in rhythms, and in phases. And the wise acknowledge this because they acknowledge one phase ending as if when the seasons it becomes fall and the leaves fall off the tree, the child does not cry. It accepts that the tree remains, you know. And so if we were seen to be the leaves on the tree of life and using various branches of knowledge to get by, we will eventually see there is a beauty to our temporalness, you know. Just like you see a young child attempting something like that people much older than that child attempt, like you see in these talent shows, the child playing incredible guitar in front of a stage of millions. You give the world a chance to grow because you don't know what it's going to turn out like. You know, you water the seeds anyways, even though you might not rest on the shade of that tree. That's kind of the attitude I feel. That's very crucial to have. In regards to subtler planes of reality, so I've spoken about this and I realized just like how we need language, language is a very unique tool. It is kind of like a magnifying glass into the objective reality's true implication. And I thought about levels of experience that we have not given words to. And when I was in school, no teacher, no book ever taught me about my imagination. The word creativity was not taught. Like we would draw, we would do things, but it was never discussed. But the sciences were, the STEM fields were. Sorry guys, I gotta pause for a moment. Enjoy the background noise of my yard for a few minutes. Sorry, I'll be back. Okay, thanks for hanging in there. Ludwig Wittgenstein, he's this German philosopher. And so he has this book called Philosophical Investigations, and honestly, a quote kind of drew me to his work, where he said, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." Before any sort of metaphysical conclusion, we have to see where that sort of metaphysical evidence, if there is, can be perceived and received. And we will kind of see it as being received in language. So in some sense, our experience has hit an edge where what we're considering to be the continuous expansion of our known knowledge has met the unknown. Okay? So the limits of our languages we are experiencing finally, and in some sense, a new sense of morality is going to emerge in all civilization. Trust me, as there is change, so do many things change. I'm going to open a random page from this book and read it for you. Okay, so this Ludwig Wittgenstein says in his work Philosophical Investigations, he says, "When I say I am in pain, I am at any rate justified before myself. What does that mean? Does it mean if someone else could know what I am calling pain, he would admit that I was using the word correctly? To use a word without a justification does not mean to use it wrongfully." You can say philosophers were the first scientists of the mind. They realized man was in a story, and they discovered the linguistic simulation that is where knowledge exists. Knowledge is kept in language, which is kept by our attention as a living being. So if we wanted to understand living being, it's as if you cannot look at the designs of your car and try to figure out, for example, how trees grow, you know? You can't look at that which is hollow and expect to get fulfilled. I find that there are two sorts of performers in the world. There are some performers who are performing for the world outside of them, and there are some performers who are performing for the world they see. And the world they see cannot be in some sense touched by the eyes of any other being. Your eyes are sacred to your experience. And unfortunately, society and civilization doesn't understand this, but your eyes are incredibly valued to the overall efficiency of all this. Because for the first time, free will can readjust. In every generation of kids, there are some kids who, in some sense, will be rebels. And when I say rebels, I'm saying in some sense they will be mystical rebels. They will rebel against the whole system of meaning of their generation. Sometimes when you discover someone's character, you do not get fooled by them. And to discover someone's character is primarily to observe them and to see how many of their decisions are collectively efficient and collectively inefficient. Sometimes I've kind of wondered, like, if an extraterrestrial, very playfully saying this, an extraterrestrial being came down to Earth and was just very chill and relaxed, and this extraterrestrial being came and said, okay, let's see what these human beings are doing. And this extraterrestrial came and saw that our attentions are on constantly knowledge and books. And eventually, this extraterrestrial will realize a vast amount of human beings, and pretty much you can say all of them do in some sense, worship contents that can be written in a book. Their beliefs, their truths are visible in language. You see the humor in it. The extraterrestrial will be like, holy shit, these guys are still worshiping words, like time to go to another civilization. And of course, we're a young species. The galaxy can't expect much from us, regardless of the context we give it, regardless of the story we put behind the clouds to justify everything. There comes a very incredible ability to be able to enjoy that which is simple and that which is complex. Because the moment you can, either you enter that kind of you abide by your true nature through observance. And as you observe life, eventually it will formulate in some sort of dualistic relationship. Just like you can say one of the early dualistic relationships that comes to the being that it's like, wait a minute, I'm asleep some part of the day, then I wake up. I'm asleep, I wake up. So there's that transition, then you see day and night, and you see many other dualities that enter the mind. So you begin to see a lot of our philosophies will require dualistic interpretations of the objective world. That means it's very hard to call this chair a chair if an object was not considered individual subjectively. It's like somebody comes and says, why can't I call this chair a cup? Because we say those sounds refer to another form. So in some sense, if I say this chair is a cup, people will correct me. They'll be like, no, this chair is a chair. And I will tell you, but what is the difference of the words used? What is the difference of the symbols? How are the values given to the symbols? How is it that this has become a chair and this object has become a cup? And we see it is an individualizing mechanism that's at work. So your intelligence is constantly keeping you as a form. You are a life that's sculpting the form as you live. And you go through various forms and you transition. And it's a very abstract concept because if we believe we're objective beings, do you know how many stories we can't be told? Do you know how many mysteries we just can't see because of the blindfolds on? Because a man who understood doubt, he could also doubt his doubt. You see? I often saw my grandmother, whenever something would happen, she would knock on wood, you know. She would like literally knock on wood. She would like, it was like some superstitious mentality. I mean, to her it was very real, and of course at that age I did not judge people's realities at all because I constantly felt I was being judged. When you're a young kid, it's funny. Some guy, I don't remember who the quote author is, but in some sense, this person said, when you're young, you think everybody's paying attention to you. When you get old, you realize nobody's paying attention to you. Everybody's paying attention to themselves. Okay, very few people actually can see beyond themselves. And some of these people, you can say like, um, when I say very few, it's as if the peak of it will be the family dynamic. That means the person has become aware, they have been able to maintain their self, they have been able to maintain a relationship, they have been able to maintain a family, a lineage, a continuity. And then they're left like, okay, what now? So that right now, as I'm speaking, there's incredibly a large amount of 70-year-old human beings on this planet who are like, okay, what now? And I will tell you, the first solution to world peace is that everybody should drink a glass of orange juice with ice in it. I feel that's going to be one of our first steps toward the world peace. People need to just chill for a little bit, you know. As I'm speaking, you're going to notice something interesting. As words tend to create a sort of subjective movie, you're going to become aware of this movie. So I've kind of noticed it when I heard a lot of different lectures. Pretty much different people have spoken to me in life, both on the screen and off the screen. So that means YouTube videos where I've seen lectures, or in some sense, people I've met who've said profound things to me. I've come to realize that the relationship of the known and the unknown best functions through an abidance of what you naturally are. So I have kind of realized when I was younger, ants would walk on my hand, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, what is this? You know, this is an interspecies war. You know, interplanetary species war or something. You know." So I resisted that which was naturally allowed to be here. And when you honor nature's presence, you're going to notice something interesting. Suddenly, the birds and the animals are no longer that violent and vicious. Seldom, it is said, most of the savage man's problems are solved through civility, because in civility his eyes can acknowledge a bigger landscape. You know, the problem with violence is that the person has not does not have enough of a sophisticated understanding to even be violent. Like this is why violence at its early ages is blind. This is why in schools, when there's violence, when there's bullying, both kids are don't have an understanding of the limits of behavior. They're just bursts of kind of dormant energy, right? And so it's kind of like we need that kind of barbarism in school to find solutions to it. Okay, you need your problem to stick around until you can solve it in a way where the world will no longer have that problem. You know, be one of those people where you walk is in some sense a better place the moment you walk somewhere else from it. So the human individual's contribution, what can we say it is? That your physical body's contribution, of course, on this planet is relatively limited. Um, but you're going to see your mind can have an incredible responsibility, and responsibility is an ability of evolution. After 4 billion years, we have become a free will that can be responsible for its own being. We're pretty much a part of the universe that can take care of itself. So God's like, okay, human beings, I've kind of left you guys on your own, but how would I say it? It's as if like God is moving nature because man can finally move himself. We have worshipped ideas for too long, and we evolved beyond idol worship thousands of years ago. And to still be stuck on idea worship means we have been afraid to access greater ways that our intelligence can be present. This has to immediately initiate into a situation where, let's say, as I'm speaking, we just require one generation of humanity to do this. You know, just pretty much one moment in the world occur where vast amounts of people are actually looking at this same issue. You know, and you see, it's very funny. People now, it's so easy for them to ask themselves, what is my purpose? But back in the day, like, there was nothing You know, people hadn't built libraries, societies, careers. None of this existed. People were just like hunter gatherers, tribal kind of people. Okay? And so we see as our intelligence expanded or went through the phases of change on this planet, eventually it came to a position where it could administer not objective phenomena but subjective phenomena as well. This administration of subjective phenomena, unfortunately, in our culture, has thought it's, how can I say it? We act as if we are just one being, but we have a notion of a mind and body simultaneously. Okay, consciousness and matter, as the ancient Vedic mind acknowledged, was in some sense consciousness and matter were simultaneous. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some kind of activity I did, and for me, I can tell you, writing was as profound as any like meditation for me. I've had many divine moments writing, where I, in some sense, a vision had been attained by my awareness that my fingers could not wait to write. Okay, I have in some sense found such moments of it's strange. It's like a serene beauty. It's like the end of the world is beautiful because the world can finally sleep. You see, there's that sort of kind of macrocosmic serenity notion, and then there's a sort of notion where the simple, as it is simple, is peaceful. The complex, as it is complex, is peaceful. It becomes an acceptance. We as our species, our civilization's greater potential is not accessible or is being inhibited because people are not choosing to step out of their thought bubbles, their belief bubbles, and for a second realize 4 billion years, 4 billion years of actual time, this real norm kind of world we're living in right now. 4 billion years, and we are this. Now, how far this can go 4 billion years ahead, our vision can extend us. It can extend our reach, as if the moment the child could not reach for that thing on the shelf, it said, Mom, can you get that for me? And so the child, in some sense, once the hand could not reach, the mind continued its reach. And you should approach the transitory nature of the world that way, regardless of if you're stepping out the womb or, in some sense, walking into the grave. In the Islamic tradition, there was a very unique saying where it was ascribed to the Prophet, where it seemed like the Prophet had said something, where in Islamic thought there was this thing where live, what was it? Let me find the exact quote actually. Oh, there we go. It was ascribed to Prophet Muhammad, uh, and in some sense, it's a quote of wisdom where it says, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave," as if a mind of peace had resulted to such an idea. And so he said, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave." Okay, so that it's like a lot of things that I see the modern generations getting offended by are, and their ancestors would be like, "Oh my God, you guys have become this sensitive." A lot of things that are stressing and depressing people, a lot of it is not physical things. Do you know how much of a luxury and convenience that is? That means we shouldn't be expecting that suffering is going to go away. We should just be very, first of all, grateful for the little amount of suffering we're experiencing compared to many of our ancestors and the lineage of our DNA. It doesn't matter how your objectivity looks. I find it like this. I feel that people contribute to their world as a body or as a mind, or both. Okay? And so what that means is if your body does not find a sense of community, find a community of minds. Do you see? A community of minds is like there's a level of intelligence on this planet where it doesn't matter anymore your objective differences. It doesn't matter. You are an intelligent being. Your intelligence matters. Your intelligence is not just chewed up data. Your intelligence, your intelligence is in some sense your vision. Your vision is your awareness of how much the past and future are fueling the creativity of your next moment. You see, they're like two wings of a bird. Heaven and hell are like two wings of this ever present mind. The wings are not the bird, and yet the bird cannot be the bird without the wings. A beautiful realm of sort of transcendental paradoxical poetry arises, because you begin to see the edge of the world as if the corner of the room could see two planes of existence at once, three planes of existence at once. I find that the moment I kind of notice that human beings are, believe it or not, your thoughts are artwork. They're art, you know? Your thoughts are art. You draw them. You draw them from your experiences and various ways the moment is. So eventually, the study of your subtler planes of reality becomes the acknowledgement of your presence beyond your personality. Once you come to your presence, eventually you come to an acceptance of it. As your mind becomes still, the ripples on the pond settle, and eventually you come to the ultimate contentment of full responsibility of self. So when the self realizes it is the world has become the self. You become responsible for not just your eyes, but for all the eyes that will open here. I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste.